So this is going to be a pretty quick video. I wanted to show you the amazingness of Azure function bindings, and I did that in a previous video specifically for C#. But here's an example Node application, and Azure function, a Node Azure function. And what I wanted to show you is the bindings. So unlike in C#, in Node we've got a separate function.json file, and that function JSON file has the bindings in it. So if we look, for example, at the first one, so this is a binding to this container, and followed by this path, basically. So, and the direction is in. So this means that this is a blob trigger. Each time there's a new file, there's a new blob in this images in container, this naming convention is going to be applied to it. So let's explain this a little bit more. Again, we're looking at only the first binding, and that first binding is a blob trigger. Now you can see right here in this in the path, we've got a number of things. We've got the container, but then we've got this destination/name, and the question is, well, where are these coming from? So right here is an example payload, and this is a JSON payload. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 fields total, or 4 fields total. And what it's got is it's got a destination, a correlation ID, the name for the image, and the actual base64 encoded image. And if you look at these, destination and correlation, let's go back to our function JSON file, and we'll see right here. Destination and name. So name is likely I made a mistake. The name should be name instead of image name. So we got correlation and name, and again we got destination and name. Destination and name. So when we drop this payload, when we take this JSON file and we drop it into this container, images in container, this will trigger the function to run, and it will retrieve the destination and the name from the payload. So that would be these two fields. It will extract from the payload from this blob, and now we can make use of destination and name inside of our function. And the way to do that is like so. So if let's take, for example, just the correlation. To grab the correlation out of the blob that triggered this function, this is how we do it. Context.bindings. dot input blob. So this is the second. This is the second binding. This binding allows us to read blobs out of this container, and it allows that blob to be inside of the scope of our executing function. So these three, and I apologize, some of these names are incorrect, but just these. And so we're extracting data out of the payload that triggered this function. And although this is not necessarily relevant to my intended demonstration, what this function does is it will grab this payload, this image, the 64-bit encoded image, which is actually a JPEG, and it will convert it to a TIFF. And as you can see right here, the input image, this is our 64-bit encoded string for that JPEG, which this function will now convert it to a TIFF. And now, if we look at our last binding, we'll see that this binding has an out direction, which means that we can easily declaratively output a blob to this location, destination/name. So destination destination in this case, it would be the container, and the name will simply be the name. So if we return to our node, we'll see here that we're taking the 64-bit encoded image, and we're going to convert it to a TIFF, and then we're going to put that TIFF that we just created into the output blob. And what this does is it automatically puts these bytes into this binding, this output blob binding. And again, if we want to see the definition of, well, what is this binding? Where is it going to? Very simple. We go to the function JSON file, output blob, and we can see where it's going. We could see what connection string it's using, and this connection is a app settings value. So, and that's that. So I'd highly recommend that if you're doing anything with functions, whether it's Node or C# or other languages that support these bindings, I really recommend that you get familiar with the bindings. They will tremendously help you connect Azure resources together. And best of all is there's no need to manage all of these connections to these different resources. And in our case, we've got several resources here. We've got the actual blob trigger. So that would be the blob container, and we've got two other blob connections, which are both also connections to these different blobs.